Good morning, everyone. I hope you are fine. In our lecture today, we will discuss the summary and the commentary of Chapter 6 in Wuthering Heights, a novel by Emily Bronte, pages from 26 to 27. This lecture of Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte will discuss the summary of Chapter 6, which includes Mr. Enshaw's funeral, Hindley's return and control, Heathcliff's and Katherine's visit to Thrushcross Grange, and an introduction to the Linton's family. Also, this lecture will discuss the commentary of Chapter 6, which contains the wildness of Katherine and Heathcliff, the difference between Katherine and Heathcliff, Thrushcross Grange, the Lintons, and Heathcliff, and lastly, the change of Katherine. From this, the characters in this chapter will include Hindley and his wife Frances, Heathcliff, Katherine Enshaw, Joseph, Nellie, the Lintons, including Mr. Linton, Mrs. Linton, Edgar, and Isabella. Setting: the place Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. Time: many years before 1801. Moving on to the summary of Chapter 6. Actually, Chapter 6 discusses Mr. Enshaw's funeral along with Hindley's return and control. So, Hindley returns for his father's funeral and brings a wife called Frances along with him. He takes control of the farmhouse and immediately makes changes, like moving Joseph and Nellie to the back kitchen and prohibiting Heathcliff from receiving an education. Hindley also makes Heathcliff work in the fields. On the other hand, he does not pay much attention to either Heathcliff or Katherine, and so they live as savages, skipping church and playing on the moors. So as you see here, the most important incident is Hindley's return and control in Chapter 6. His return moves on the events and the incidents in the novel. The importance of his return lurks in preventing Heathcliff from receiving his education and making him work in the fields. That will have so bad effect later on in the novel in regard to Hindley's son, Harrington. Another important point in Chapter 6 is Heathcliff's and Katherine's visit to Thrushcross Grange. So one day, both Katherine and Heathcliff disappear. When they cannot be found, Hindley orders the doors bolted. Nellie waits up for them, but finds out that Heathcliff returned home alone. Thereby, he explains to Nellie that he and Katherine ended up near Thrushcross Grange and stole closer to peer into the windows and make fun of Edgar and Isabella, the Linton children. However, as Katherine and Heathcliff laugh at the Lintons, they are heard and run away. Skulker, the Linton's dog, chases after them, biting Katherine on the ankle. More importantly, we have in chapter 6 an introduction to the Linton's family in general. So, because of Katherine's injury, Katherine is unable to get away. A servant from Thrushcross Grange carries her into the Grange. On their part, Mr. and Mrs. Linton are shocked at the appearance and behavior of both Katherine and Heathcliff, and are unwilling to allow Heathcliff to spend the night, even as they tend to Katherine's injury. On his part, concerned for Katherine's safety, Heathcliff spies on them. He sees that they treat her like a queen. After a visit from Mr. Linton, who scolded Hindley about the manner in which he raised his sister, Hindley threatens Heathcliff with punishment the next time he so much as talks to Katherine. So, here we have an introduction to the Linton's family, and we have the beginning of the relationship between the two families, the Ancients and the Linton, in chapter 6. That will shape the rest of the novel. Okay, after giving a brief summary to chapter 6, now we will start with the commentary. As a matter of fact, in chapter 6 we have 4 important points. The first point belongs to the wideness of Katherine's and Heathcliff's natures. That reflects the nature of people at Wuthering Heights. So this wideness leads to rough freedom, which is contrasted to the dignified calmness of the Linton children, reflecting the nature of people at Thrushcross Grange. So, being able to roam free across the moors best illustrates the wideness of Katherine and Heathcliff's natures. This rough freedom of Wuthering Heights, however, contrasts with the dignified calmness of Thrushcross Grange. Similarly, the Linton children are characterized of being safe, spoiled, and cowardly, serves as a contrast to Katherine and Heathcliff, characterized of being self-willed, strong, and rebellious. Okay, the second important point in chapter 6 is the revelation of the difference between Katherine and Heathcliff. So for the first time, a difference between Katherine and Heathcliff is revealed. She is drawn to the civility and luxury present there, whereas he is repulsed by it. Ironically, Heathcliff is once again an outsider meeting with rejection. Heathcliff will never be a welcome presence at Thrushcross Grange, but Katherine will always be treated as royalty. This actually is an important point that leads to the third important point in chapter 6 that discusses Thrushcross Grange and the Lintons in relation to Heathcliff's point of view. So we have here a narration according to Heathcliff's point of view. So within Nolly's narration, The events that transpired at Thrushcross Grange are told from Heathcliff's point of view. He immediately dislikes the Lintons and what they represent. They represent the social class. Plus, they now have what he cherishes most, namely Katherine. Therefore, the narrative once again becomes slightly suspect. Perhaps things occurred exactly as Heathcliff relates them, or perhaps he paints a slightly skewed picture. So, here we have the information according to Heathcliff's point of view, and his point of view also is not objective. He is biased because the Linton now have Katherine and they despises him. So, in this respect, we can conclude that Heathcliff's point of view is actually biased, and this makes the narrative suspected. Lastly, the fourth important point in this chapter is the change of Katherine. This chapter marks the first significant change in Katherine's character. She experiences a whole new world at Thrushcross Grange, a world that will not and cannot contain Heathcliff. Gradually, this change in Katherine will lead to a change in the relationship between Katherine and Heathcliff, whether she wants it to or not. So, the importance of chapter 6 lurks in the change of Katherine's character. That will be the most important motive for the rest of the event in the novel. That was the end of our lecture today. For further reading, please refer to these references. Next lecture, I will discuss chapter 7 and 8 in Wuthering Heights, a novel by Emily Bronte. Thank you very much for your time and good luck.